Guys, it's Tina and I am back, and I am here with a swatch and review video for you guys for the brand new Kat Von D Serpentina palette that has been teased a lot on social media, and it finally debuted, and I couldn't wait to get my hands on this because I was so excited about it. So I definitely went ahead and picked it up. It was so right up my alley with the jewel tones. I was really excited. So let's go ahead and jump into the swatches first as usual, so you can take a gander at all the beautiful shades, and then we'll go ahead and jump into the review.
Alright guys, so here's an overall view of all 8 shades in this palette, starting out with the shade Blood Milk, Medusa, and Ankh. Then we have the shade Queen, Hieroglyph, Nile, Scarab, and Venom, and of course the pigment Prophet.
So as usual, I'll be applying these eyeshadows over a light layer of primer, and for the swatches, I will be using the Kat Von D Shade and Light eyeshadow brush. The first shade up is Blood Milk, which is described as a matte brick red. This shade is a matte burnt red with a touch of orange undertone to it to give it that brick look. You do have to really be careful to layer it properly so you get full pigmentation and smooth color payoff without the patchiness. Then we have the shade Medusa, which is described as a bronze shimmer. This one is almost like an olive tone tarnished bronze shade, and it has silver shimmer to it as well. It's a little bit chunky when you pick it up from the pan, but it applies smoothly, and you can see that it's nice, smooth, even pigmentation on my skin. And then we have the shade Ankh, which is described as a matte black with gold glitter. This is a deep matte black shade with microfine gold glitter to it. It causes a lot of fallout, but the glitter is really beautiful. If you use a tacky base, I'm hopeful that a lot of that glitter will stick to the lids. And then we have the shade Queen, which is described as a rust glitter. This one is more of a burnt rusty cranberry shade, and it applies pretty smoothly to the skin and has great pigmentation. And then we have the shade Hieroglyph, which is described as a copper shimmer. This one is a bold, in-your-face, orangey copper shade. Does come off a little bit flaky, so you do have to press your brush to get the flaky particles to lay down flat and really stick to the skin. I can see the shade being a little bit troublesome, so use a stiff brush and a sticky primer. But already on my skin, I see it's ready to flake off, so I anticipate a lot of fallout from this shade. And then we have the shade Nile, which is described as an ocean blue shimmer. This one is a beautiful deep jewel tone blue shade. Again, the texture seems to be a little bit loose, like it doesn't want to stick to my skin, and I have to press really hard to get it to just stick. And then it's showing a lot of texture, which seems to suggest that it's gonna flake off, so I would use a very sticky primer or even dampen my brush to get that shade to really stick to the skin. And then we have the shade Scarab, which is described as an emerald shimmer. This is a deep jewel tone emerald green. This applies a little bit more smoothly, and it doesn't have that flaky pigmentation, but you do have to build it up to get full color payoff, and it's a beautiful jewel tone shade. And then last up in the pressed eyeshadows, we have the shade Venom, which is described as a matte royal purple. It can be a little bit patchy, but if you use a dense brush, it will give you smoother pigmentation. And then of course we have the loose pigment, which is Prophet, and it's described as a fool's gold. And this is a beautiful metallic tarnished old gold shade. You'll see that yellow gold with a hint of green sheen to it. It has a really beautiful metallic shiny finish to it. I can just imagine applying this wet. It's probably like a liquid gold looking shade. So again, here are all 9 of the shades swatched. We have 8 pressed eyeshadows and 1 loose pigment. There are only 2 matte shades in the palette. The first shade and the last shade of the pressed eyeshadows, and then the others definitely have more of a metallic sheen, except for the black shade Ankh, which is more of a matte black with shimmer. They're all beautiful jewel tone shades, but I am a bit worried about the copper shade and the blue shade, especially because they have more of that flaky texture. I'm worried about how the fallout will be with those if you don't use a sticky base or if you don't use them with a damp brush. Alright guys, now that you have seen the swatches, you've gotten a little bit of a taste of what I think about the eyeshadow quality and how they apply and perform. Let's go ahead and jump into the review. And as usual, I like to talk about the price first because, hello, it's our money. What are we paying for this? So this guy is $45 and it does contain 8 eyeshadows at 1.1 gram or 0.04 ounces each, which is almost a full-size single small eyeshadow, which are typically 0.05 ounces. So you're getting 0.04 ounces per eyeshadow here, which is a good deal, right? And then you also get a pigment that is 1 times 1.5 grams or 0.05 ounces. So you do get a 0.05 ounce of pigment here. Now you do get 8 shades included with that single pigment for the $45, but the Kat Von D Shade and Light palette included 12 eyeshadows and that was $46. So I do think it's a little bit steeply priced, but it is within the same price point as typical Kat Von D palettes, which is the mid $40 range. However, you're getting less eyeshadows than you would in a typical Kat Von D palette. You're only getting 8 versus 12 from her regular palettes. So you're getting less product here and paying around the same price. You do get a pigment, so maybe you can take that or leave that, you know, whatever it is. But I do think it's a little bit pricey for what you're getting. I think it would have been better in the $30 range, but I am not like so bummed out because it's not $50 or $60. So the price, although it's a little bit too steep, it's in line with what you would expect for pricing from Kat Von D, except that you're getting less shades. Now let's go ahead and talk about the packaging, which is interesting, as Kat Von D's packaging is always interesting. There's always a twist because she is an artist after all, so she is gonna put her own twist on it. And the box and the palette have the same Serpentina Kat Von D design on the front, and then on the back they have the eyeshadow names laid out. So these line up to the eyeshadows inside with the pigment in a little bit of a circle there, and then it has the sizing information on the palette itself. And it does say here that the use life is 12 months, so you have the open jar that says 12 months. So you have a year to use this without any issues due to the preservatives in here. And on the box it says the inspiration for this palette came from more of a sentimental versus actual muse. But if I had to choose a physical representation, I'd say it's inspired by the essence of Egypt, Cleopatra to be specific. Although she's portrayed as one of the most beautiful women in history, the truth is her most powerful qualities were her intelligence and self-creation. She was the original pioneering woman. And that's a quote from Kat Von D, which that's very nice. So it's inspired by Egypt, and I can definitely see that. The lettering on the palette is signature Kat Von D. She always has something special in her lettering. And can I just say one thing? It's Serpentina. What's my name? Say my name. Tina. So I love this palette name just for that part, the Tina part, right? Don't even ask. But on the back again, you have the eyeshadow shades named, and then the palette is held by a magnet in the lid. And it's weird how it fits because there's no flap or anything. It just is magnetized at the sides. And it's a thicker palette and a very long palette, which, I'm not the biggest fan of that. I find that Kat Von D's palettes are becoming a little bit too bulky for me. But neither here nor there, I can get over it. But it is a little bit thick and a little bit long, so storage might be a little bit of an issue. But inside you have a mirror, and then this looks like the Prince symbol, right? Rest in peace, Prince. This little symbol here, and then a mirror. And the mirror is a long, narrow mirror, so I don't find it very useful because you can only see very close up. But if you're applying eyeshadows, I can see how you can use that. But it doesn't, it stays up like this, but it will flop over. So just be careful with that. I don't use mirrors in palettes, but you know, just thought I'd mention that. And inside you have the 8 shades laid out, and then you do have the names printed in gold at the bottom. So you don't have to keep referring to the back. The shade names are printed, which I think is a beautiful touch. I love when palettes have the names printed on the palette. I mean, why wouldn't you always do that? And then even the little pigment has a little hole where it sits, and it has the name printed as well. Now, as mentioned, there are 8 shades, and they're jewel tone shades, which the shade selection to me was what drew me to the palette. I knew it wasn't gonna be a neutral palette. I knew it wasn't gonna be an everyday all around palette. I knew I couldn't use this palette by itself, and I knew that going in. And a lot of people are saying that they wanted a transition shade, they wanted a highlight shade, but I'm like, this is an accent palette. You know going in what the colors are, and I think it is that drew me to it, because it's different from the other palettes that come out that have transition shades and smoky shades and highlight shades. It's a palette that is not meant to stand on its own. It's meant to add to your collection. And so many of us have transition shades already and highlight shades, and we have our favorite blend-in shades already. So why would I want another palette with a bunch of blend-in shades that probably don't even suit my skin tone anyway, so who cares? This palette is great. It's a great selection of colors for me and my taste. So if you're intending on getting this because you want an all-around palette, that's not what it is. It's gonna be a accent palette. It's a kind of a accessory palette that you add to your neutral palette to give you pops of color and jewel tones and smoky shades. And I really did appreciate that she went that route and just did something out of the normal or out of the ordinary for this palette. Now, with that being said, I love the concept of this. I love that it was Egyptian themes. She was inspired by Egypt and the jewel tone shades. I think the theme is perfect, but the performance of these eyeshadows left me wanting more. I love the shades. Like, the shades are beautiful to look at, but they take work, and I wasn't expecting them to take work, because her metal eyeshadows, her single eyeshadows, are so beautiful. And I did a swatch video of that. I'll leave that down below. They're so beautiful. They work so well. They blend beautifully. They're beautiful shades, and I expected the same formula to be in this palette, and it's not. I didn't look at the ingredients closely enough. The ingredients are listed on the box, so if you wanted to take a look at them, I know that it doesn't contain parabens, which I always look for, but it does contain some oils, silica, mica. There's no talc from what I can see, and it has different iron oxides. It has safflower seed oil, which makes that slip and sheen, and dimethicone. So it has good ingredients that would make you think it's going to be a great palette. But I had some trouble with some of the shades, and since there are only 8 shades in this palette, I didn't expect to have issues with any shades. Like, if in a palette with 20 shades or 14 shades, 18 shades, whatever, if they're 12 or more, and if 1 or 2 shades suck, I can get over it. But in a palette where I only have 8 shades to choose from, it really hurts a little bit more when the shades don't work quite right. And I had such high hopes for Hieroglyph, this coppery bronzy shade. And it's crumbly, and it applies sheerly, and it blends out, and it almost wants to fall off my eye. It doesn't really want to stick, and that's when you're using it dry. Of course, you can use them damp to get them to really stick to the lid and really adhere, but it should be good dry. I shouldn't have to apply it wet for it to perform for me, and that's what bothers me. Nile was the same thing. It gets so patchy. It's a beautiful shade, and you apply it and you're like, yes, and then you start to blend and you try to add more, and it starts just almost balling up and flaking off, and you're like, what the hell? And it shears out so much. You can barely get color payoff from them, and I'm like, this is some bullshit. Pardon me. But I was so mad. I was like, but this shade is so pretty. Get it on me. Get it on. You have to use them damp to get them to really pick up, and that, I wanted to scream, because those are the 2 shades that I automatically went to, because I'm like, yes, give it to me. And those were the 2 flops in the palette, and it hurt my feelings a little bit. I will admit it hurt my feelings, because that's 2 out of 8. Like, what? That's a quarter of the palette. Are you serious? Are you serious? I was very upset. And then I tried Scarab. Oh, Scarab is so beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful shade. And the Prophet pigment, another beautiful shade. It's metallic. If you use it damp, it's going to give you this high metallic sheen. It's so pretty. And using it dry, it works really great. So the loose pigment actually worked better than two pressed eyeshadows, which that's not the way it works. But Scarab and Prophet were just beautiful. And then Medusa is also another beautiful shade that I had a great time using. It's a great neutral, it's almost like a neutral olivey tarnished gold shade. It's beautiful in a neutral look, but it has some chunkier glitter in it that's going to give you fallout issues, so be mindful of that. But I love that shade as well. It applied well, it blended out nicely, it gave me great pigmentation, no patchiness, it didn't crumble on itself. Beautiful shade. Queen is just your run-of-your-mill caramelly plum shade. It wasn't anything special. I expected it to be special because she already has like a plummy shade in her lineup. I'm like, why would you do that again? But for what it is, it performs well. It's a good shade. And then Ankh, which is that darker, deep, coffee, dark brown, almost black shade with the glitter in it. The glitter doesn't stick around, so it ends up just being a black, which I kind of don't mind because it's a black and I need a black to smoke things out. But then I'm like, wait a minute, but it's the glitter that I really wanted, so how do I incorporate that? So if you're looking at the shade thinking it's gorgeous, it's gonna stick, the glitter is gonna stick, you're gonna have to work with it to make it stick. You're gonna have to use a sticky primer or a glitter glue to make the glitter stick, which I thought was a waste of a shade. I would have much preferred it to be like a coffee brown chocolate shade with glitter in it, kind of like Medusa is, and then, you know, make it work that way. But it's not a bad shade, it's just not gonna give you what you think it's gonna give you. It's what you see is not what you get. It's not what you get. And then Blood Milk and Venom are not good shades on their own. Like if you're gonna, play, they're matte shades. They're the two matte shades in the palette. Blood Milk is the deep red and then Venom is the dark purple. Now when you see the swatches, you're like, oh yes, that's beautiful. I can apply that all over the lid. It's gonna be fantastic. It's gonna be a good time. Not really. They are patchy, they apply patchy, and they need a lot of layering to get them to really pack onto the lid. And if you really want to pack them onto the lid, like kind of full-on colorful look or a full-on dark look from them, you're gonna need to use a base, a colored base, to really get them to not be patchy and show through too much, through your skin through. But the saving grace is that if you use them in the outer crease, or you use them in other words, if you use them in a concentrated area, if you use them on the lower lash line, you use them in the outer crease to darken up a look, they will work because they're gonna be in a concentrated area. You don't have to spread them all over the place, and they will work and they will look great on the lid. On the outer lid. But if you try to spread them out too much, they start getting patchy and start brushing away. So they can work, but they're not the best match shades, and I kind of expected them to be great. So for half the palette pretty much to be flops, to me it's not a value palette at that point, because it's 8 shades for $45, $45, what did I say, $45 or $46, and for 4 of the shades to be kind of so-so, it throws me off, because I'm like, excuse me, 8 shades should be phenomenal. I could probably stand for 1 not being the best, but for half of them not to be that great, it was a great disappointment to me, especially when I know her single eyeshadow formula is so bomb and it's so good. I expected the same formula to be in these eyeshadows, so that threw me off. I wouldn't recommend you run out and get this palette. It's beautiful to look at. It's a great collector's item. I'm not giving it up because it says Tina on it. Like, excuse me, it says Tina, thank you very much. But it's not a palette that I would wholeheartedly say to you, listen, you need to get this palette, because it's very troublesome. Half the palette is troublesome to use, and I don't think the other shades are enough to save it. Did you just hear that thunder? Oh my god. we're having thunderstorms right now, but I'm saying that yes, you agree, thank you. I don't think the 4 decent shades are enough to save the palette. So I don't know, let me know what you think. What have your experiences been? Have you tried the palette? I don't know, like, let me know what you think. If you tried the palette out, what do you think? And how do you feel about the eyeshadows? Like, how do they apply? I know the swatches look divine. They look beautiful. When you swatch them, they look nice. But in performing on the eyes, they don't quite hold up. And I can't, with any good conscience, say go and get this palette for 4 shades that actually work and then 4 that you have to struggle with. So, yeah. Those are my thoughts. I don't think it's a complete flop because I'll tell you right now that pigment, the scarab shade, the Medusa shade, I love them, but for that to be the only thing that I love about the palette is like ridiculous. But I already have it. It has my name on it. I'm gonna keep it, but if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't have purchased it. And if I had to recommend it to someone, I would be like, no, you can skip it. So take my opinion for what it's worth. Test it out yourself. See if it's something that you want to try out. But that's just my experience with the palette. So let me know what you guys think, if you tried it out, if you are gonna try it out. And yeah, until my next video, which will be very soon, I'll talk to you guys. Bye.